Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Life on the Vermont-Quebec border has always been an interesting place to live. During Prohibition, bootleggers and rum runners sped across the border from Quebec to provide us alcohol-thirsty Americans with our booze. But following 9/11, life on the border changed. No longer could we cross the border with a wave of a hand or a friendly smile. Today's guest is Fernando Beltran, the patrol agent in charge of the Newport station of the U.S. Border Patrol. Today we're going to talk a bit about the Vermont-Quebec border then and now. Welcome to the show, Fernando.
Thank you, Scott.
Well, this isn't the first time we've teamed up to talk about the border then and now. If I recall right, the last time we did it was at the Goodrich Memorial Library, and I thought it went off pretty well.
It did. I agree with you.
Right. So let's start off. Who is Fernando Beltran? Because, you've been in the news quite a bit.
Well, not lately, but...
Well, no. Actually, you've maintained a low profile, well, as low as a man your size can keep.
Well, I try. I've been a Border Patrol agent for 27 years. I've been in here the last 7 years as a patrol agent in charge of the Newport station. I'm a family man that lives out in Vermont. I came here, fell in love with the place, and I think I'm here for the duration.
Right. When I interviewed you for my article I did on you, I found you to be one of the... I know you probably don't view yourself as fascinating, but I always love these stories with... You were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you were born into the life of a migrant worker.
Correct.
And, a lot of people think the American dream is dead. You're living proof that you can do whatever you put your mind to.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up... I was actually born in Salem, Oregon. I grew up all over the country because my parents, we traveled from state to state in seeking crops to work in the fields and stuff. Our home base was Texas, but we traveled to Oregon, Ohio, Minnesota, Iowa, all over the country. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't. It was a happy life for me. I mean, I didn't really think I missed out on anything, but it also, made me realize how important education was, and to try to get out of that vicious cycle of following in my parents' footsteps, as far as working in the fields and stuff like that. So
what did your parents think about you leaving the farming?
Well, my parents pushed me toward education. They insisted that, at the age of 16, I not drop out of high school to continue working, and, just pushed me to get my high school degree. And after high school, I went into the military, and then I was able to join the Border Patrol.
Now, there's a whole lot different about Texas versus Vermont, but is there some similarities in the people? Because were you from a poorer section of Texas?
Well, I was from the lower Rio Grande Valley of Texas. It also has a lot of opportunities, for people. When you grow up there, you don't have to live where you were born. I mean, there's so many, opportunities now that weren't available for my parents, but they were available for us.
Right. So you worked the Mexican border first, I assume.
Oh yeah, I started out in Arizona. Yes.
Right. And what was life like there for you? Because it had to have been a lot faster paced than it is up here.
Well, it was. Back in the 80s, it was when I got hired, the Border Patrol was 1,000 people. 1,000 agents guarded the border from San Diego, California to Brownsville, Texas, and the whole northern border. Had 1,000 agents. So I was a part of a big push to hire 500 agents. So that would bring the total of agents that guarded the U.S.-Mexico, U.S.-Canadian border to 1,500 agents. There were more police in Washington, D.C., guarding in the Washington, D.C. area, between the federal police, the state police, the local police, and all the agencies. There were more police in Washington, D.C. than guarded our nation's borders. Now we're up to about, I think, 22,000 agents.
Now, why the change?
Well, I mean, 9/11 brought a big push to hire a lot of agents. But, gradually it had been growing because the immigration problem in the United States, was growing. So we had to, our borders were under attack, by illegal aliens. And our forces had to grow to meet that challenge.
Now, when I see on the news the violence that's going on along the Mexican border or right across the border in Mexico, is that exaggerated or is it even worse than what we see?
Well, the Mexican government, which I don't speak for obviously, but there used to be a lot of blogs that you could get on and find out, see firsthand what was happening down there. Well, they've curtailed a lot of that because, in the government's eyes, a lot of the atrocities that are committed by these cartels are done to put fear in people and to gain notoriety. So what they've been doing is the government is not publishing any pictures. They're not, you're not seeing anything.
Right.
They're keeping it limited. If something happens, you may read about it, but you don't see the film at 11. You don't see the pictures in the newspapers and things of this nature, because they don't want them to gain all this publicity and spur them on. Because it seems like it's a one-upmanship with these cartels. One of those. You kill 3 of mine, I'll kill 6 of yours, type of thing, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So
if nobody knows about it, it's not helping their cause.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like, if you go out and blow something up and it's not, it's not in the papers or anything, you don't get any publicity over it. It's one of those, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a noise type of thing.
Now, does the violence come across into our country?
I'm sure it does, in a limited. I don't think it's as prevalent here in the U.S. as it is in the Mexican side.
Now, on a given day when you were on the Mexican border, what did your day look like? Did you have contact with illegals or smugglers every day?
Yeah, pretty much.
And so, when you moved up here, and I understand from talking to you, it was actually a former Newport resident, Gary Vians, who retired from the Border Patrol, who convinced you to come up here. What was when he suggested that you might want to look at the northern border called Newport, Vermont? What went to your...
Well, Gary and I worked together in Yuma, Arizona, way back in 1985. And we kept in touch throughout the years, and he was down in Texas doing some training, and I met him there, and we were out at dinner, and we were talking about the directions our careers had gone and stuff, and then he asked me if I'd ever thought of the northern border. I said no, not really. I mean, the snow, the ice, wasn't really something that appealed to me. So he said, you should look into it, and I did, and I moved up here, He let me know there was a job up here, and I applied for it, and was interviewed and got the job. I came up here, and like I said, I fell in love with the place.
And I think the one thing you've done right, well, I think some officers in various departments, probably around the country, don't do it the same way you do it, is you've maintained a very public presence, even when you're not in hot water, as in not you personally, but during border issues. You've always maintained a very public and personal presence in the community. Do you think that's important for somebody in your role?
I certainly do. I think that if people know me and meet me when I'm out there, they can come up to me in easier manner to talk to me about issues that they may have. Is, you know, instead of going, let's say, to the paper and saying, hey, you know, this is something that's happening in our area that the Border Patrol's causing, or you know, if a person were to call me and say, hey, can I talk to you? It's like my you know, my office is always open. People can come in there and talk to me without necessarily needing an appointment or anything like that.
Right.
And if people call me and want me to come out to their house to meet with them so they can discuss an issue that they may have with, you know, something that Border Patrol is doing or not doing, then I'm certainly available for that.
Right. But of course, as you've told me, is if somebody has an issue with the action of an agent, you don't want to hear about it a year down the road.
Exactly.
You want to hear about it then.
Exactly. You know, it's like if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, last month there was a car that says, you know, well, how am I going to track? If you tell me, hey, there was a car out here today or yesterday, I can track that down. I can find out who was assigned to work that area or who it might have been. You know, but if you tell me something that happened a month ago, a year ago, well, that's a little harder for me to track down.
You know, I actually remember the first time I met you, because I'd gone to meetings as a legislator and as a history writer, and I hadn't even talked to you yet, but I remember it was in Price Chopper parking lot. I believe you were out of uniform. You started talking to me, and it took me a bit. Who is this guy? And ever since then, I've been out on patrol with you to get a better understanding on what your job is. Because, you know, over the years, the last couple of years, you've had some, not you yourself, but the people who patrol and man the border, you know, you've been over some rocky roads. So, okay, I want to direct viewers to the screen here. It's photos of the agents in 1924. When you look at that photo, Fernando, what do you think? What do you look at?
Well, you know, a lot of the traditions that were set back then are still followed today. Right. You know, the uniform, the ranks, you know, the pride that these guys are displaying in this photo. You know, they're proud to be part of this organization, and a lot of that, you know, is instilled in the agents as they come in, and it's something that continues today.
You know, when I was a reporter with the Chronicle, I used to do the police beat, and the favorite group of people, the Border Patrol was really my favorite group of people to deal with, because you are filling, you know, you had some big shoes to fill when John Pfeiffer left, because he also was an outstanding leader there. But I used to like to deal with John and the agents, because other departments, they kind of play games of what they're going to tell you, what they're not, and a lot of it's just, you know, more like game plan. But you were very honest on what you can tell, what you can't tell, and why. And I never felt there was any game playing.
Well, you know, John is a good leader. I mean, he continues to be a good leader. He's our chief of the whole sector now. Yeah. And right, I mean, you know, we're not out here to play games. You know, we'll let the public know, you know, as much as we can, without jeopardizing national security.
Right. So, what do you drive today for vehicles?
For vehicles, well, we have sedans. We have pickup trucks. We have some Tahoes. There's a, you know, we have like ATVs and boats and sleds for the winter.
All right, so now the viewers will see this photo. Do you have any motorcycles with sidecars?
Well, we don't have any here. There are some in the Border Patrol. There's a couple of Harleys are out there somewhere that they were testing to see if like a motorcycle police, you know, type vehicle would fit our organization. I don't know where we stand with that. We don't have them here. Right. I mean, I wouldn't mind having one, but. Right.
And if the viewers look very closely at the photo, the car in front of it is actually a rum runner or bootlegger that was captured or stopped along the border. And if you look at the gas tank, which is right at the rear of the vehicle, it has bullet holes in it. That's how the officers often stop the vehicles. I have many newspaper articles talking about officers trying to shoot out the tires, shoot out the gas tank. If I hadn't read some of these news accounts, I'd say, no, that can't really be true. Now, is that standard operating procedure today? If I'm just going down the lake road and I'm not stopping, are you hanging out your window shooting my tires out?
No. Back in the day, there wasn't as many rules, I guess. Or the rules were different,
right.
I should say. But no, we are under restrictions, and hanging out your vehicle shooting is not one of them.
No. Well, the thing is, though, you probably have license plate readers. You have, communications with probably. I don't know about if you have communication with the White House, but you have communications with just about everybody. I've spoken to people who were officers before they had any communication, where that if their only form of communication was they would stop at people's houses and phone ahead if there was a problem or if there was somebody running. Could you imagine being an officer in those days?
No. I mean, I'll tell you what, technology has come a long way, and we try to stay on top of it and get some of the best technology that's out available for us, right, for our organization. And it makes not only does it make your job easier, but it makes your job safer.
But on the other hand, with all that technology, although it's helpful, you must have to have a keen eyesight and just some good intuition to do your job.
Well, certainly. Your training comes into play. Technology only takes you so far.
Right.
That just makes the job easier. Those are just tools.
Right.
But the experience that you gain, whether it's on the southern border, northern border, I mean, just the experience of interacting with people, reading people, knowing when somebody's lying to you, it's just invaluable.
That's the funny thing is, I know you don't, just for clarification, the Border Patrol, you don't actually man the port of entries.
No.
You're the ones who are out patrolling.
We patrol between the ports of entry.
Right.
We patrol those areas where the port of entry, the port of entry is the official way for commerce, right, and people who come into the United States, travelers, and we're out between the ports.
Right. I would really like to know, I must have had guilt written all over me, because back in my younger days, well before 9/11, if I was going to come across that border, especially when I was late teens, when we used to go across the border for no good, I would come across and I could not get through without being questioned. And one time I thought I was doing the agent or the officer, I thought I was doing him a service. So they decided to bring me in to check me out. So as I'm going in, I take out everything out of my pockets and I throw it in the garbage as I'm going in. Not the right thing to do. There was an officer almost head first down in that garbage can, thinking that I had thrown away contraband, but all he found was Twinkie wrappers.
Yeah, it's it is different. What we do. There's a distinct difference in our jobs. I mean, but the main goal for both the Office of Field Operations, which is the old Customs, and the Border Patrol is national security.
Right. Now, this photo is a photo from my collection. This also shows a seizure at the border. What these horses were used for, they were actually old, worn-out horses that people living along the border would use. People who wanted to smuggle alcohol. They would bring them over to Canada, load those bags up full of alcohol, and then they would leave the horses there, go back to their farms, And the horses, which I understand have a homing instinct, would then come across the border and walk back to the farms with the bags of booze. And in this case, what happened, it was obvious, is they didn't make it back. The officers spotted them, and they ended up with the horses and the contraband. But here's the funny thing is, you know what they did with these, the bootleggers did? They would then go to auction, because they didn't want to keep these horses, the customs didn't.
Right.
They didn't want to keep them, so they'd put them almost immediately up for auction, and then the people would go back, buy their horses back, and they did the same thing with their vehicles. So has the way that people smuggle, has that changed a lot over the years? Because you still must have some of this kind of stuff.
Well, to tell you the truth, when I was in Texas, we did, same rules apply. You catch a vehicle smuggling, you seize it, and then the government auctions it.
Right.
And it would not be, strange at all to seize a vehicle several different times. Mm-hmm. You seize it, we don't know where they sell them or anything. It's an auction that the Border Patrol's not part of. We just seize the vehicles. They tow them to an unspecified location. They turn around and auction these vehicles, have these vehicle auctions, and then it could be a month or two later. It says, "This car looks real familiar. So we got this car before."
Right.
And then we seize it again, because they're smuggling again, and you auction it off again, and you'll see.
And back in
keep seeing it, because the same thing is going. And people are going out and buying, their vehicles.
Well, back in the old days, when I did my book, Rum Runners and Revenuers, Prohibition in Vermont, what I understand is some of the best patrol cars of the time were actually seized rum runner cars, because there was different groups of rum runners or smugglers. Some of them were just good old boys, local people who were decent people, just trying to make ends meet. But then there was the big boys from like Boston, New York, who used Vermont as a corridor. They had really hopped up vehicles, and back then in the 1920s and 30s, sometimes the officers ended up with those vehicles as patrol cars.
Well, that's correct. Sometimes the service will seize a vehicle that they think they can that's not too beat up or has it's got a lot of things that it has to meet before the service can say, well, we'll put it into government service. If it's something that's worth keeping around. That'll happen nowadays too, but back in the day, yeah, I mean, they were probably limited budgets, and these guys had. I remember when I first came in the '80s, the Border Patrol had auctioned off all their Grand Furies, or their Plymouth Fury cars, which were big muscle cars, and they had gone back to the K cars that were big with restructuring of Dodge, right, and what have you. So the government purchased a lot of those cars. So we had K cars trying to chase down a Fury, and that just didn't work out. We had Ford Fairmonts, and those Furies had the like 383 engine or something, and it's like you could not catch up to those cars. And the smugglers all had our old cars, and we had these new cars, and it was quite surprising when you couldn't But the advantage we had was our communications, our aircraft, our radios. I mean, you don't have to drive fast to head them off.
Yeah, it must be tough now for, having an eye in the sky. It must be tough to get away from you guys now.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say it's, impossible, but yeah, we're vigilant out there, and we will. We won't give up. I mean, we have our force multipliers here, which is the state police, Caledonia, Essex County, St. Johnsbury PD, Lindenville PD, Newport PD. I mean, it's a force multiplier. We're all out there doing the same thing. We're all after the same. We want to get bad guys off the street. And with our radio communications, the way they're set up, and the relationship we have with these organizations, it's part of our northern border strategy, and it works out great.
Now, this is a photo of an unfortunate. Well, actually, the person in the boat is a patrol agent during the Prohibition era, and the photo was actually taken on Lake Champlain. But in the bags were bottles of booze that were coming down Lake Champlain into Vermont. Do you have it now today? Lake Champlain had a very, very active boat patrol to capture contraband coming down during Prohibition. Do you have a presence on Lake Memphremagog?
Yes, we do. We have a good presence out there. We have a couple of boats, and we're also out there on sea-doos.
Right. Oh, sea-doos.
Which they didn't have back in that day.
No. Do your officers remember they're out there to work, or do they get spinning donuts or anything?
No, I'm sure they're all out there working.
So what do you find, like on a boat, do you ever find anything, or are they a lot of just honest mistake type things that they didn't realize?
Some maybe mistakes, but our goal is that, we can't be wrong once.
Right.
So we need to check everything that comes across and doesn't report or doesn't follow the procedures, right, as far as we're concerned. Right.
I know one time I went out on patrol with you. You were asking me different questions on locations of different things, and now we talked about what a line house was. It was a makeshift bar, mm-hmm, that was that straddled the border, and technically the way the line house worked is during Prohibition you could drink on the Canadian side, but you couldn't drink on the American side. And there was one out on the is that considered the North Derby Road where I...
Spooner's?
Yes, Spooner's Line House. Boy, you are getting to be a good local. Actually, if I listen, you're actually starting to have a Northeast Kingdom drawl.
Oh, really?
So, but to the viewers, this is what a line house looked like. This line house wasn't Spooner's Line House in Derby, but this was the Canaan Line House in Canaan, Vermont, and it straddled the border. And these fellas here, I found out a few years ago, they were a group of people from down country who saw the opportunity to make money off of Prohibition, and they came up here, bought the house, renovated it, and as I said, technically you could drink in Canada, but you couldn't drink in the United States. Well, there's a question on whether, I don't know, how would you enforce that today? Could you?
It'd be next to impossible. I mean, if they're drinking on the Canadian side, we have no authority on the Canadian side. So
okay, Brandy, who works for the station,
right?
She lives in a house that straddles the border. If Brandy decided to open up a line house, her own little booze establishment there, would she be able to do that?
Well, she would be subject to the Canadian rules on the Canadian side and the American rules on the American side.
How many houses are like her house left?
There's several in the community that are still half in the U.S., half in Canada. Mm-hmm. But, it's... they're numbered. As a matter of fact, I think that Canaan Line House last year was being remodeled.
Right.
I don't know how far that remodel has gone. Right. But I remember I told you they were working on it. So it'd be interesting to drive out there. Maybe we can do that one of these days and see how it's going.
But if one of those buildings is seriously damaged in a fire, they can't rebuild it, can they?
No.
Right.
No. They can maintain these buildings. They can maintain them as long as they're being lived in or what. Right. As long as you maintain it, you're good to go. Just push the button. But you can't. If it burns down, you can't rebuild.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the history of the border, and I've shown the viewers and you a lot of photos of the past. But what does this photo show?
This is the port of entry.
Right.
The I-91 port of entry.
And that's growing almost with every passing year.
Yes, they have quite a large operation. The traffic grows every year. I mean, more people want to come in. They were being evaluated to see if they could build a bigger port. Mm-hmm. I don't know what stage it's in right now, but they really need I think they've outgrown their operation there.
Right. You know, to us locals, I mean, when I say locals, I mean people who've been here almost since eternity or been here for decades, we've gotten kind of accustomed to operating on the border like the border didn't exist. Because a lot of times when I was growing up, and even until 9/11, a lot of times we would see, back in high school, we would see some of our teachers moonlighting at customs and immigrations, and you'd wave, you'd go through, and at most you, unless it was me, then they decide to shake me down. As I said, I don't know why, but it was just a guilty look. But for the most part, it was a very friendly border manned by people we know. Will that day ever come back, or is this the way it's going to be now?
You know, when I first got here, my friends in Texas would ask me what it was like here, and I said, "Man, this is like Mayberry," you know, because you see little kids walking to school by themselves, you know, little kindergarten kids. It's like, you know, I'd look around like, where are these kids' parents, you know? Because where I came from, you know, you're no child. You never saw, if you saw a kid out on the street by himself, you stop and ask him if he was lost, you know, where his parents were. And around here, it was just, you know, so refreshing, you know, to see this, you know, kids playing in the park by themselves with no parents around, you know. It's like, it was like unbelievable to me because you just don't see that.
Right.
You don't see that. In this part of the country, it was prevalent. You know, people did it all the time. Now, you know, we're not going to go back. It's not going to go back to that. I mean, this is one of those places, and it got so much attention. You know, the unguarded roads and all these things. You know, so not only do people get this as a human interest story, but the criminal element sees this and says, hey, there's a place, you know, we can exploit. And they try to exploit it to the max. And the thing is that, you know, I mean, when you're talking about the people that, when you used to go back and forth, I mean, it was probably just a numbered, I mean, you probably knew everybody that went back and forth. You know, there weren't people coming in from as far away as Ottawa or Montreal to cross here, you know, where there's places that are closer for them to cross, but they come all this way because they think it's an easier spot to get away with whatever they're doing. So no, the short answer is no.
You know, I see a lot of parallels between what happened during Prohibition, though. During Prohibition, most of the local people who got involved in bootlegging were typically pretty decent people. They were doing it to make a little extra money. But here's the thing is, you had the people from the urban centers who came here. Oftentimes they exploited the naiveness of the local people. Like they would convince these young people. A lot of times the young people would be up across the border, as they do today. They were up there drinking. And the next thing you know, they would say is they were hauling a load of booze across the border for these hardcore smugglers. Now, I personally know I know of a couple people who were very decent people and young people who have been drawn to carry drugs across the border in a very similar manner just by the modern day version of alcohol smugglers. Do you see that happening very often?
It happens. I mean, it's. I think it happens more often than we want it to, or they would be comfortable with.
It's amazing, you know, what some people will do if you flash, you know, a little bit of money in front of them. Let me put it this way: with my history at the border, I'm not going to go there because I'd be the first one busted. And in all seriousness, as an adult now, when I go through that border, I almost feel like a rock star. Is when I go over there, I stopped going for a few years because I weren't going to get a passport. I didn't want any of this. That isn't my thing. Those are my friends and neighbors over there. I don't need one of those. Well, so I stopped going for a few years, but then one day I had to go up to Stansted to do some history work. Guy let out a holler, "Hey, Scott." It was a Canadian guy. He said, "We love your radio show." And got talking, and so then I came back across. I expected a full body search, cavity search, and everything coming into the United States. They called me by name. Everybody knew me, and as I said, I guess I felt like a rock star. No more dragging me in and frisking me and jumping in garbage cans. So, when you're on patrol, do you meet a lot of good people, though?
Certainly. I mean, this area, like you say, it's filled with good people. I meet some great people. This part of the country's got some great characters. You sit and listen to some of their stories, but yeah, I've met a lot of good people up here.
I remember the one thing that really touched you, though, is, as you know, you attended some Derby Line Village Trustees meetings that you probably would rather have been at home watching a ball game. During the height of the whole Stone Garden, and just when there was a really strong presence, there were probably meetings that you probably wished you could have forced yourself not to go to, and they were tough on you sometimes. But what happened when your mother passed away?
Well, a lot of these meetings were at the Derby Line meeting house there, and I'd come into the select board. A lot of these meetings were in front of the select board, or select board meetings. And yeah, there was it never got negative. There was some strong language and strong feelings, and people are passionate about the positions they hold and the citizens they represent, and yeah, it was, people resist change. They do, and there was some resistance there, and it was some heated. You're describing it correctly. It was some heated, encounters and what have you. But yeah, my mom passed away, and I don't even know how they found out. And I got a sympathy card signed by the select board of Derby Line, and I was very touched that I felt like when I'm at those meetings, I felt like I wasn't. They really didn't care about what I was bringing. They saw me as a G-man and nothing else. And when they sent me that card, I was touched the fact that they viewed me as a human being and as a member of the community, and as, if I may even go out and say, as a friend, because they expressed their sympathy, and I really felt like they were talking to me like a friend. So
did you ever work in any other place where that would not have happened?
Oh yeah, I've been in a lot of places where it's like if they don't like you, they don't like you. I don't like you in this meeting. I just don't like you.
Right.
If I see you out in the street, I wouldn't. If I saw you fall out in the street, I wouldn't stop to pick you up, type of thing. So, yeah, this is a very, very, different. Like I said, Mayberry. It's a very different place.
What I've told people, like during heated moments, people say things that they might truly mean, but they don't. It's not personal. It's not. They're just passionate. It's not personal, even though I'm sure the recipient sometimes thinks it's very personal.
Well, I found that to be the truth, because when I talk to the select board members individually, sometimes, whether it's at their place of business or at the street or a coffee shop or something, the conversations are civil and and actually fun, to sit there and converse with them, as opposed to when you go in that meeting and it's all official and it's fire and brimstone.
Right. Okay. Now we've talked about, you had those entry points where people could just slip across from Canada into the United States, but what about a street like this, Canusa Avenue? Now, how do you patrol that? Part of it's in the United States and part of it's in Canada. So what stops somebody from slipping right across there? Now, I don't want you to give away any secrets, but
my job is a tough job, and it's not without its challenges.
Right.
And this is one of the challenges that we face on the northern border. Is the fact that we have a situation here where it is hard to patrol. It is. We maintain our vigilance. We rely on the neighbors, on the people that live on Canusa. Oftentimes they'll call us when they see something suspicious, and we respond to that.
Okay, if there's how do you know who responds? Is it the Canadians who responds? Is it the U.S. who responds? Say to even to non-smuggling instances. Let's just say there was the state police received a complaint of a domestic violence. I know you folks probably don't always. You guys help out each other. Mm-hmm. Who responds? The state police and you guys, or is it the Canadian side?
Well, it depends. If it's on the Canadian side, then the Canadians respond.
Right.
And if it's on the U.S. side, the U.S. agencies would respond, whether it's VSP and us backing them up in some capacity. That's the way they...
So how about if I'm going down Canusa on the United States side and you're chasing me?
Well, wait. If you were going down Canusa, you'd be... If you're coming on the U.S. side, you're coming from Canada.
Right.
If you're going down Canusa, you'd be on the Canadian side.
Yeah, but how if I switched and I went into the other country, though? Do you follow me?
At that point, we'd probably call the Canadian authorities, the RCMP,
right,
to intercept you, because you're going to be in Stansted there.
Right, and then you have areas such as this. You're out in the middle of nowhere, and explain to the viewers what that line is up over the hill.
Well, that's the international boundary.
Right.
If you see that, if you can see it there toward the right side of the photo, right, you can see a clear-cut swath there, if you will, and that is the U.S.-Canadian border.
Now, how do you guard that? Because there's a lot of trees up there. Now, I could find my way across, but maybe other people couldn't. But how do you guard that?
Well, we patrol on ATVs, on our vehicles. Our guys are out there on foot. They hike those, and with helicopters and aircraft, they'll go out there, and if they see trails or they look like new trails or something, then we'll go out and investigate those.
Right. Because I remember when I was growing up hunting on the border, that at that time, sometimes you crossed over into Canada and you didn't even know it, because sometimes it grew up so much that that you didn't even know you were crossing. Now I've been near the border. Now there's no question when you get to the border now.
Yeah, the International Boundary Commission, which works on both the Canadian side, the U.S. side, they're pretty good about keeping the slash clean, if you will. Right. If there's an area that's overgrown, you can call them,
right,
and say, hey, there's a couple miles here. And I think it's every 2 years they take turns. The Canadians will clean the whole thing, or the Americans will clean the whole thing. And like I said, when you have patches where it's overgrown and it needs to be cut back, if you call them, they'll send a crew out there to take care of it.
Right. And what about this photo? What does that show?
That is up there on the line farm. That's one of the monuments. That's one of the monuments that marks the U.S.-Canadian border, and it's up there on the lime farm. And that farm, when that was built, was half in the U.S. and half in Canada. And he had fields in the U.S. when it was a working farm.
Right.
Had fields in the U.S. and fields in Canada. And it was a common occurrence back in the day.
You know what I have?
I think he tore down. He had a barn that he tore down, or had fallen down.
Right.
And he had it removed and then applied for permission to rebuild it and was denied.
Right. Okay. Now, as we talked about, you can have all the technology in the world, but you also just need a lot of eyes out there. And from going out on patrol with you, is although you've only been here a few years, it seems like everybody seems to know you. And like when we were out on patrol here, we met Mr. Goodrow.
John Goodrow.
Right, and you just had a chat with him. You weren't shaking him down for any information. And if I recall right, I think we even left with some maple products even.
Oh yeah, John's got a good history of the whole BB area there. I mean, he grew up there. He lived there his whole life. He's a great man. I every time I see him outside, I stop by and talk to him. And listen to some of his stories. And he's a good friend. He's a good guy.
I'm not an officer, and I'm not going to pretend I am, but I think the way you do it is so right, because I suspect that you're even when you're going down the road, you see a farmer working out in the yard, you probably just pull in and ask him how his garden's growing or something, and not looking to pump somebody for information, but because you truly want to know them.
Well, I got to know John real well because he came and asked me for. He owns property on both U.S. and Canada,
right? And
he had some. He had a fence that had fallen down. He wanted to put his fence up, on the Canadian side, but he had to travel from the U.S. side to get to it. And he says, I'm not going to get the RCMP on me, am I? Because I'm driving my U.S. tractor in Canada.
Right.
So I called up my RCMP counterpart. I said, look, it's his farm. He owns the land on both sides. He just wants to drive his tractor to pull the fence post over there and do this and that and fix it, And it was like the RCMP said, no, we don't have an issue with it. I mean, he's not leaving the farm or anything. It's like, no, he's just going to be out there working on his fence. So then I saw him a week later. He says, how's your fence going? Did you get it? You get it done? He says, well, no, but I can't find anybody to help me.
Right.
I said, you can't. It's like, no. I says, well, I went back to the office, checked out for the day, and I came over and I knocked on his door. Says, well, you ready to fix that fence? And we took a ride down there, and I helped him fix about a 50-foot section of fence. And it's like, and that's I think what got me that maple sugar.
Now, I know you probably don't expect your officers to go out and mend fences and everything, but do you expect the same conduct when they run into the members of the public?
I feel that we and I'm talking about me and my supervisors, and we lead by example,
right? And
we want the guys to be able to step out there, and you don't have to help somebody rake leaves or something, right. But if you see somebody that needs a hand, stop and offer a hand. I mean, it's not like, well, that's not my job or anything like that. I mean, we want the community to view us as members of the community. A lot of the guys live here. We're members of the community, and we want to be, like any other member of the community that will stop and offer a hand to a neighbor that needs it.
Well, one day, I happened to notice we had lunch over at the hospital, and you probably don't even remember it, but when we came out of the hospital, there was this little old lady cleaning the snow off her window shield, and you grabbed her thing, and you said, no, let me do it. And although I do know there's probably officers and other people who would do it, I still love to see it because that's something I would do. But I think particularly when you're in law enforcement, I think that really means a lot. And I think you actually, you may have not solved a crime right there by helping that woman clean her window shield. But you know what? I think by that conduct, I think in the future it probably, maybe she won't be the one to call up on something, but somebody will.
Well, that's just the way I'm wired.
Yeah.
I can't explain it, but
you actually like people.
I do, but the thing is that as being in law enforcement, I think I chose this career because I wanted to help people.
Right.
And I think we all should be doing that.
Right. Now we've talked about smuggling in the past, but look at this. Look at this load. This is this was a load from several years ago, actually, before you came on. It was a photo that I used in my book, Rum Runners and Revenuers, and it shows also a huge load of booze, but unlike during Prohibition, which the alcohol was coming from Quebec, during that period, particularly before 9/11, alcohol was flowing north. Is that because New Hampshire didn't have any taxes or something?
I really don't know what the reason for the smuggling north. I think it's more expensive in Canada. I think the Canadian taxes on liquor are high.
Right.
But it's like anything. When you said there was a demand here for liquor and it was being brought in from Canada, I mean, I'm sure that even if Prohibition didn't exist and liquor was just cheaper in Canada, people would be bringing it in. So I think this is the same thing that's happening here. Liquor is cheaper in the U.S., so there's a profit to be made there, and that's the whole thing with smugglers is for the profit.
Well, even during the War of 1812, the locals along the border, not everybody, of course, they decided. We were battling Britain at the time. Well, British soldiers were stationed right across the border. We decided a lot of locals would trade with the British because they got more money from trading with the British. So our country ended up setting up a kind of a garrison up in between Derby and Derby line, basically where the Derby Cemetery is now. And it wasn't necessarily to protect our country against the British, but it was at least in part to stop us from trading with the British. So when the soldiers were off fighting on Lake Champlain, the British came down, and this hasn't been written much about. I've written about it, and it's in the Derby history book. The British came down and burnt down or tore down our garrison here, and so they could continue our trade. So smuggling on the Vermont-Quebec border has happened since the beginning of time, ever since that border was there. And you know what? I have a feeling smuggling will continue long after we're gone.
As long as there's a profit to be made,
right,
people will continue to try to exploit the area, exploit the borders.
Right. What more do you think the viewers, we only have about 3 more minutes left, what more do you think the viewers would like to know about your role as a border agent?
We're a structured organization, and we have been involved with the community here. We try to help out a lot. If some of my guys organized a coat drive, we have the Feds Feed Families going right now, where we donate food to food bank or food banks. For the next couple of months we'll be doing that. We help out with the food drive here in November, I think, right. October, November. The guys live in the community. They really are involved in it. We have guys here that coach basketball and baseball teams here in the area, local area. We have we're part of the community. We live here. We everything that affects, every decision we make that affects the community affects us.
Do you have some officers who move here who just simply go stir crazy? Because if you're coming off the southern border where there's action all the time, and if you're a type A personality, it must be tough.
It is. Some of these guys, they find it, a little bit too slow sometimes. I've had guys that left because it was just too slow. They just missed the action too much. But, there's a lot to be said for the work we do here.
Right.
It's no less important. We may not get the huge number of apprehensions they get on the southern border. But like I told you, every apprehension here is important because we can't be wrong once.
Right.
And the thing is that we have a very dedicated force of agents out there, and they do realize the differences between the two areas, but also the importance. I mean, we also don't have 500 agents at a station.
Right. And I know this is before your time, but you're probably aware that maybe 15, 20 years ago, they actually caught a person carrying a bomb across the border in Richford. So, it can happen.
Oh, yeah, that's one of those things that we try to remind the guys that, it's you never know what you're going to run into out there. So you always have to be, at your best.
Right. Well, as we wrap up, I just want to thank you for all of your service, because there might be people who are listening to this and who think they know you and be thinking, wait, he has this guy all wrong. But from what I could see is I still think they ought to clone a whole lot of officers, and especially the commanders after you, because I've spent quite a bit of time with you, lunch, breakfast, on patrol, and I think you're a heck of a stand-up guy who's not prone to BS.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Scott. I try to be, you got to be who you are.
Right.
Life's tough enough. You try to pretend to be somebody else.
If somebody wants to contact you, if they have questions or concerns, how should they contact you?
You should just call the station. The number is 334-1333, and my extension is 4003.
Okay.
That's my direct extension.
All right. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Certainly. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.